think we can get started.
Well, welcome to the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Government meeting, Wednesday the 24th, May, 9 o'clock. First item is to have the roll call. Sam.
Sure. Chester, Charlene Danisak is not expected. Clinton, Carl Kilduff, we don't have a response, so I'm not sure if he hasn't arrived yet. Cromwell, Anthony Salvatore is expected, but coming late. Deep River, Angus McDonald is here. Durham, George Deans, I don't think he's expected. East Haddam, Irene Haynes, she is not expected. East Hampton, David Cox.
I'm here.
Essex, standing in for Norman Edelman, we have Carrie Duquesne.
Morning.
Haddam, Robert McGarry.
Here.
Killingworth, Nancy Gorski.
Good morning.
Lyme, David Lom, he did not respond, so I don't know if he's expected or not, but I don't think he's here yet. Middlefield, Selectman Jim Irish.
Good morning.
Middletown, Ben Florsheim, I don't know if he's expected or not, but we'll see if he arrives. Old Lyme, Timothy Griswold.
Here we are.
Old Saybrook, Carl Fortuna. He is here. Portland, Ryan Curley. He is
Good
here.
morning, I'm here.
And Westbrook, John Hall.
Good morning, everyone.
And then for the for additional seats on the MPO, Joe Comerford is expected. I'm not sure if he's in yet. And then Darlene Briggs from the Middlesex Chamber. And
Good morning.
And then we have a few guests. We have Steve Sullivan from Eversource, Jeff Pugliese from Eversource, TJ Magnoli from Eversource. Robin, are you also from Eversource or? Yes, okay, yes, Robin. Yes. Kaepernick also from Eversource, so it's the Eversource team. We have, let's see, Julia McGrath from Representative Courtney's office. And from RiverCOG staff, we have Torrance Downs, Brendan Garrity, Margot Burns, Eliza Lopresti, Susie Beckman, Megan Juflis, and Rob Hermit and Janice Erlemeyer. And did I miss anyone in introductions? If I did, please introduce yourself. I think that's everyone. All right, Mr. Vice Chair, we can continue on.
All right. The second item on the agenda is public speaking. Do we have anyone wishing to address the council?
Julia,
can I just add that we do have a few people in the attendees that I didn't recognize. So if you would like to speak, could you just throw that into the chat?
Oh yeah. So and we also can also upgrade you to participants. So I see a few other participants. We have Eric Shortell from Federal Highway Connecticut Division. We have Sam Carmody from Eversource. We have a few others, and if you want to be upgraded to panelist, you can introduce yourselves as well. There's a few names I don't recognize. So I see Julia McGrath from Courtney's office. We usually call on our congressional delegation staffers to report. We also have Ellen Graham from Blumenthal's office joining us.
Good morning. Happy early Memorial Day. Glad to see everybody. Unfortunately, on the federal side, I don't have a hugely substantive update as we're still facing the debt limit issue, which I know you're probably all incredibly tired of hearing about and are anxiously seeking a resolution. That has pretty much been the focus of the past couple of weeks and will continue to be so until that is resolved. Once that is resolved, we can go back to the appropriations process. We're also one more slight positive. We are, looking ahead to our August recess and thinking about how we want to use our time for that. So if you do have any requests that you'd like to make, I'd be happy to hear them. That's a fun month in the summer. It's a busy month, but it is nice to, have that full chunk of time to get out into the community. Other than that, we have a couple deadlines approaching. The Safe Streets for All grant deadline is coming up this midsummer. And, I know, obviously, congratulations to RiverCOG was successful in a planning grant. If anybody else is thinking of applying for that, we would be happy to really enthusiastically support that to the administration. So feel free to let us know about that as well. But unfortunately, that's pretty much the extent of the update. As always, we're here and happy to help. And hopefully next month we will have some productive news to share.
Well, wishing you all the best. Down in yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
Any report from Blumenthal's office? Ellen?
Yeah, like Julia said, not much to report on the front, just waiting to see what is happening in DC. Just want to thank everyone for their well wishes for the senator. He's doing great. He is very mobile and is just using a cane right now. So it did not slow him down one bit. So thank you guys. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. That's it for me.
And Mr. Vice Chair, we also have Senator Martha Marks just joined us. I don't know if you want to say hello, Senator Marks.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I don't think this is the first time many of you probably meeting me. Hello. I'm here up at the Capitol, ready for another busy day of session. You know, lots of different legislation being passed. As chair of Veterans and Military Affairs and vice chair of Public Health, those are two areas that I've been putting a lot of my energy in. I love a bill that we just passed out of the Senate, Senate Bill 6, which there's a section called One Then Done, which is what I wrote and I named it, like click it or ticket. And it's about prior authorizations that the insurance company can only ask one time for a prior authorization. Of course, I wanted it for a lot of different things, but it's called negotiating. So right now it's One Then Done for prior authorization for medications for autoimmune diseases, MS, and cancer. You know, a rationale of that is if you have MS and you need Ocrevus, you get the Ocrevus working, your MS isn't going away. Every 6 months, you're going to get a treatment. And we all know that patients and the physician office trying. So it's something I'm pretty proud of. Lots of other bills. You know, obviously it's the budget too. The budget's still with leadership. I sometimes think the lobbyists know more about the budget than what the legislators do. Learning a lot up here. Sam probably knows more about the budget than I do. So, but we are meeting with leadership. We're giving our, you know, what's important to us. The delegation along the Shoreline East line is, so we're supposed to meet with the governor today about fully funding that Shoreline East. You know, I live in New London. But you know, it affects all of my towns that I represent, and it's very important to me. So hopefully we'll be able to get some better funding for that. And I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Senator Marks. As you may be aware, or maybe not, RiverCOG was a recipient of a federal Thrive grant from the Thriving Communities Program to do transit-oriented development plans around our stations in Old Saybrook, Westbrook, and Clinton, as well as the downtown Middletown passenger terminal. Transit-oriented development only works if you have transit. And there's been so much talk about transit-oriented development, but unless you invest in transit, you know, it doesn't work. And so that's something that we're very concerned about. And transit service is very much chicken and egg. When service is cut back, people reorient their lives and don't use it anymore. And unless you restore it to the way it was before, people are not going to be able to make decisions to orient their lives to use it. So we ask for your support.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I take the train a lot from New London, and there's quite a few people in New London. There's physicians and nurses that work at Yale that take that train every morning, and they don't have the flexibility that they had before. So with so many different areas, I think I'm pretty sure with the leadership of Senator Cohen, she's really done some, you know, deep dive into this, and I think we have some ways to find the money. So I'm like cautiously optimistic.
And one comment is that when we first got an inkling that this could happen, I met with staff at our transit district about you know, if they are going to cut the train, at the very least they could fund some supplemental express busing, because the current bus service between New London and New Haven just doesn't work. Estuary Transit District runs from Old Saybrook to New London, and they also run from Old Saybrook to Madison, where you connect to a bus to New Haven. If they are going to cut the service, at the very least, for the trains that they're cutting, they should have some supplemental express bus service to serve the shoreline stations that are going to be impacted.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment or legislators want to say something?
Eliza, do we have a report from our regional election monitor? Is Carol here?
Carol was not able to attend, and I do not have a report.
All right, thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, I think that's it for our public comment.
All right, then we can turn to our Eversource presentation. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Just hearing very briefly the beginning, the Council of Governments, I think it's a great organization for our state. So I really do thank you for taking time, especially when I see your agenda. I mean, you folks are working it today. My thought was to talk briefly about rates, because that certainly is foremost on our customers' minds, and you probably get questions in that regards as well. But then hopefully I'll leave time for any questions that you might have, including storm response, which is typically second on our customers' minds. And Mr. Chairperson, if I start to run long, just give me the hook, or if somebody's got a question and I don't see it, just grab my attention. First, I'll just say we are a proud member of the community and we support the local economy. To that end, just a couple of quick stats. We have 1.3 million customers. So the vast majority of your constituents are also our customers. We have over 4,000 Connecticut-based employees. Again, many of them are probably your constituents. Just last year alone, we invested $1.4 billion just in our electric system. So the transmission and distribution system in Connecticut, $1.4 billion in investment last year. And we also contribute with taxes, property taxes alone across Connecticut, over $270 million last year. So for most of the municipalities on the call, I suspect we're probably your number one property tax contributor. If we're not number one, then I'm pretty sure we're in the top 5. Just beyond that, in the local area, about 160,000 over the last year in donations to local charities in the Lower River Valley. Many of our employees also volunteer, the Ray of Light Farm, St. Vincent's de Paul. I am not a golfer, but many of my folks are talking about an upcoming tournament in Cromwell that they seem very excited about volunteering for and trying to make that go smoothly. So with that, I'll just turn quickly then to the rates. You've probably all heard the summer supply rate decrease, and that would be in effect from July 1st to December 31st. We just announced that rate, and that did go down. For the average customer, it'll be about a 22% decrease. It is important to note, though, that we also tend to use more in the summer. They're predicting already 90 degrees next week, so kind of our first time that we'll really see some significant heat. Folks are probably going to break out the air conditioners, and those two things can often balance off. And I say that really because folks should be asking us these questions, our customers, but sometimes I know those same customers, your constituents, they turn to you with questions. I went to great pains, and we certainly did as a company last winter when the supply rates went up. We went to great pains to try and say, that's not us. We're in the delivery business. We're not in the supply business. We're not responsible for that rate increase. And I should be saying the same thing now that the supply rates are coming down. And that's primarily what this is. It's a supply rate decrease, all due to really the competitive market on the generation side. So with that, I thought I would try to actually unpack rates because it's a very complicated subject. And again, I know you get a lot of questions that really probably should come more directly to us. And if you look at your bill, first of all, you see probably a dozen line items on there with acronyms that are almost impossible to understand. I've been in this business now well over 30 years. And I can't understand them unless I have the decoder ring or a cheat sheet, if you will. But if you have that decoder ring, those line items break out pretty clearly into 3 areas. a supply area, the people who make the electricity, the delivery area, how that electricity gets from the generator to the customer, and then a public policy area. And I'll try and go through all three of those quickly. Public policy is pretty much exactly what it says. Those are incentives, really, admirable incentives that are put in place either by PURA or by the legislature, or in most cases, a combination of the two. And they break out really into two groups. One is assistance. So for folks who qualify for public assistance, it's really helping them with their electric bills. The other group, I would say, are more long range, forward thinking incentives that have been put in place to try and help move Connecticut faster towards a clean energy economy and getting us to carbon neutral by 2040. So it's important to note, though, that public policy, Eversource make this zero markup. Zero of those dollars go to Eversource. Those are they're either a pure pass through, or in most cases, it's actually shifting from one customer to another. So the public policy piece, Eversource makes zero on that. And I should note, when you look at your bill, I've broken it out into three rates: supply, delivery, public policy. The public policy piece is embedded in that delivery rate. So about 20% of that delivery rate is public policy. So, sorry, do we have a question? Okay. So the middle piece is delivery, and that's all Eversource. It's our transmission system and our distribution system, how we're getting the power from the generators to our customers, your constituents. On the transmission side, we're heavily regulated by FERC, the feds, if you will. On the distribution side, we're regulated by PURA. As I said, that's the core Eversource business. It's the only area of those three areas where we make any money. That's how we get our money in order to invest that $1.4 billion in the system. That's how we're able to invest in 4,000 Connecticut-based employees. And yes, that is how we're able to create a reasonable shareholder return, a shareholder return that's in the same bandwidth as all public investor-owned utilities across the entire United States. The third piece is the supply side. So these are the generators. It's a deregulated, competitive market. It's typically about 50% of your bill if you average that out over the entire year. Eversource makes $0 on that supply side of the market. And that is the volatile piece of the market. And that's really where Eversource comes in on the supply side. If you as a customer do not go to energizect.com and get your own supplier, as 80 to 90% of our residential customers, and probably the majority of your constituents, they do not go to energizect.com. I don't go there. I'm a default rate customer as well. If you don't go get your own power, then somebody has to get it for you. And that's where Eversource comes in. Sometimes it's called the default rate. Sometimes it's called the standard service rate, but essentially somebody has to buy that power for you. So that's where Eversource comes in. And it's a regulated process. It's a very transparent process. We go out to bid in that competitive generator marketplace. The bids are reviewed by both the OCC, the Office of Consumer Counsel. They're reviewed by PURA, and then ultimately they're approved by PURA. And I don't say that to try and say, hey, those supply rates, that's on PURA or that's on the OCC. We were heavily involved in putting that process together on how we go out to bid. We actually do the bids ourselves. And I would say if you look back over the last 10 years or so, that has actually led to a rate that's either lower or at least more stable than some of those competitive rates that are on energizect.com. That is not the case when you start getting a very volatile market in that winter timeframe. Oftentimes you can get a better rate on energizect.com, and we encourage customers to do that. So that's rates in general. I guess the last thing I would say on that is if you take your bill and you average it out over the course of the year, you average out kind of that high winter rate and the apparently lower summer rate, As I said, about 50% of it is the supply piece. Eversource makes no dollars on that. The other 50% is called delivery, but a significant piece of that is public policy. And that breaks out, if you look at the total bill, about 10% will be public policy. And then that last piece, about 40% of your total bill is typically Eversource. That's where we generate the dollars to invest in our people, invest in the infrastructure, and get ready for that transition to clean energy to get to carbon neutral by 2040. So with that, that's kind of rates in general. I know there's not these Zoom meetings, it's hard to get a lot of back and forth, but I'm open to any questions on that or any other subject.
Mr. Sullivan, might I ask, the town of Old Lyme, about 3 months ago, engaged a broker, and they found some, quite a number of rates that were in 11 to 12 cent range, and Eversource being 24. I'm just thinking, why is the Eversource rate so high when there's seemingly a lot of suppliers that would be half that?
Yeah, great question. And even the summer rate that's going down is about 14 cents. So it's a little under 14 cents. It's in the high 13. So even the summer rate is higher than some of the quotes that you're seeing. So it's really around how those bids are structured. So how the bids were put together, and again, a regulated process where we're really bidding over a short-term period. So we're going out in the marketplace for bids for 2 time periods per year, from January through June, 1 time period, and then July 1st through the end of the year. And we really don't have the ability to hedge. There's a little bit of a bleed over. So right now, we just announced the summer rates, if you will, that run from July 1st through the end of the year. But at the same time that we were purchasing that, we were also looking out into next winter for that first 6-month period. And we have about 25% of what we would need for that time period purchased. But that's about as far out in time as we can go per regulation. What you're getting with the third-party aggregators, they're doing more hedging, if you will. So they're buying rates over 6 months. They're buying rates in the marketplace over a year, and they're also buying rates over 3 years and over 5 years. So they're able to spread that risk out. So to one degree, they're more normalizing the up and downs of a summer and a winter market, but they're also spreading it out over time. Whereas our process is kind of limited to purchase in that 6-month period. Now, we have had discussions with Pura about changing that. Right now, those changes haven't been made. And I actually think this is pure conjecture on my part. I think Pura is looking at it and say, let's not have a knee-jerk reaction. We've had this process in place for 10 years. But when you're in a normal marketplace that is kind of just going up steadily at the rate of inflation, then our purchasing power, which is representing 80 to 90% of those residential customers buying in those short-term 6-month increments, has actually led to a good outcome, where typically we've been lower than the competitive marketplace, or at least very competitive, which is why Pura and others were encouraging a lot of folks not to go into the marketplace, to use the more stable, whether it's Eversource or UI. However, when the market has now gone up and down, and I can talk about that if you would like, when the market goes up and down, then when you're buying in those short 6-month increments with no ability to hedge, you can get caught where you're buying in that up market in the winter and then the down market in the summer. So hopefully that gets at your question.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. A couple months ago, I was at an ECRA meeting, which is Middletown's Waste Authority. They own a waste energy plant in Lisbon. And I was really shocked to hear that their prices of disposal had to go up because they were getting so little money for generation. And at the spot was like 2 cents a kilowatt hour, yet the generation on our bills was 22 to 24 cents higher. Where is that 22 to 24 cents going if it's not going to the generators?
So, I really couldn't talk to the mechanics of that. However, I can give you of that specific generator, but I can talk to essentially how it works. So that bid piece, as I said, we're not in the supply market, so we're not a generator, make no money from that area. When we go out to bid, we are actually not, the bids are not coming directly from the generator. So it like Millstone as a company is not in that marketplace. The trash generator that you're talking about is not directly in the marketplace. There are these third-party aggregators, and that's who's actually in that marketplace. Now, some of those third-party aggregators are also generating companies. They're Constellations of the world, the NextEras of the world. So these are very large, national, if not international companies to be able to participate in that marketplace with that volume of dollars and that volume of risk, if you will. So I can't talk about how the third-party aggregators then buy it off of the generators and how they come up with their pricing. But that's really where you would get the difference. The one thing I would say about what drives the 24 cents versus a lower rate, such as Millstone, which is, the state has a great contract with Millstone that I want to say is in the 6-cent range. New England as an area is heavily dependent at this point in time upon natural gas. So if you think about it, all the coal-fired power plants have retired. Almost all of the oil-fired power plants have retired, and the ones that are left are really just here for peakers to get us through the winter. We do have a couple of nuclear power plants left, but it's really Millstone and Seabrook. They're the only two that have left. The others have retired. And we have offshore wind coming, but it's really not here. It's still a few years away, and you could argue whether it's 3 to 5 years away or whether enough of it's going to take more of the time frame of 10 to 15 to make a huge difference. But at this point in time, we're heavily dependent upon natural gas to the tune of about 50% for New England. And those natural gas fired power plants that proliferated over the last 20 to 30 years, again, they're in a competitive market. They're not obligated to run 24/7, 365. They can choose to run, they can choose not to run. And therefore, they didn't choose to build new gas lines to come into the area to support their load. So what happens is, in the summer, they have plenty of gas. But in the winter, those gas lines were built really to supply all the residential customers for their heat load. So in the winter, especially if we have a cold snap, all of that residential gas is what's called firm supply, and it goes first to those residential customers. And only what's left over goes to the natural gas-fired power plants. So in the winter, especially in a cold snap, they basically have two choices. They either shut down and they don't generate electricity, which is very bad for us as an area. That's why we talked about the potential of controlled outages in the winter. But more likely what they've done in the past and what we really think they will do in the future is they turn to liquid natural gas and they burn that to generate their electricity. But LNG is a very competitive worldwide marketplace. It gets loaded onto tanker ships and they can go to Asia, they can go to Europe, or they can come up here to the Northeast. And what happened last year, for reasons that we're all aware of on the news, Europe used a lot more LNG, and they were signaling that they were going to use even more. So the natural gas fired power plants had to bake that into their bids, if you will. They had to be prepared that they might have to use a lot of liquid natural gas and pay an extremely high price for it. So again, I'm not in that end of the business. I'm in the delivery business, but that, from everything I'm aware of, that's what drives that winter gas supply, I should say, price spike.
Okay, thank you. Tim, we have David Lom with his hand raised.
Very good.
Mr. Sullivan, I'm listening to you talk about the pricing of electricity. It sounds like Connecticut should be the middle of the road. We're just sort of going with the flow. Yet, according to a not yesterday, but a recent Hartford Current article, we're the highest rate in the lower 48. How does that happen?
So I think when they're looking at that rate, that's an all-in rate. So it comes right back to that supply side. And that's across all of New England. So if you look at other parts of the country, they are still burning coal. So and other parts of the country are still burning natural gas. They don't have that pinch in the gas line. So that all winter long, they're able to burn that shale gas. That's
Well, then we
relatively
should be tied
inexpensive.
with the rest of New England, not higher than the rest.
Well, I would say if you look across the 6 New England states, Connecticut versus the others, the rates are virtually even with each other. So and there are times where the time frame that you go out to bid can make a difference. But if you look at, for instance, National Grid's winter supply rate was significantly higher than the Eversource Connecticut winter supply rate. Not because we did better than they did or they did worse. The timing of when their process put them out to bid last winter was at the high part of the spike. Just like here in Connecticut, UI's rates were slightly less than Eversource rates over the winter months. They went out about a week before we did, and that made all the difference in the world. So if you're in this highly volatile market, just little differences like that can make a big difference, which is one of the reasons why we've suggested, hey, this process has worked great for the last 10 years when you're in a relatively flat marketplace. When it's going up and down, we should look at maybe doing something different moving forward. And I think we'll continue those discussions. Just one last piece on that. When you look at rates, it's supply, it's delivery, it's public policy. When you narrow down and you just look at our delivery rates, which is what Eversource controls and where Eversource makes its money, if you just break that out, you peel off the public policy piece, and then you compare us to the rest of the country, we're basically at Florida Power and Light's delivery rates, which are considered extremely competitive. When you add it all in, you get that supply side where we are considerably higher than the rest of the country. And you add that public policy piece, which are very admirable goals, which for the most I personally support and our company supports, but they are a 20% adder on top of the delivery rates that many other states do not experience that. They might be doing it in some other way as a state, but they're not doing it through their electric rates.
Very good. Do the members or participants have any other questions for Mr. Sullivan? Very good. Well, thanks for the primer, and we'll look for the new rate.
Well, at least it's going down for this one. Again, just to warn you, I don't see that infrastructure problem changing, and I don't see Ukraine changing. So we are worried. When we look out into the future, I mentioned we were purchasing some power for next winter. It looks like we're going to be in the same range again. So I don't like to end with that, but I just want to be clear. That's probably the roller coaster ride that we're in, but we greatly appreciate your time. And if this was of any use to you, certainly willing to come back for any other subject, of your choice. So again, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to your staff who diligently come every month.
Thank you for that shout out. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll turn to the business part of the agenda. First up would be the minutes of April 26th. May we have a motion to approve the minutes? Come on.
So moved.
Move second.
Seconded.
Very good. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, ready to vote. All in favor of the minutes, say aye or wave.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Very good. They are approved. Next item is the TIP amendment number 26, and Rob will lead us through that.
Okay, yep, we have one TIP amendment today, and this is a statewide project 170-3640. This is for service plaza signs and sign supports, basically using a a new standard for the signs and new logos and things like that on I-95 and I-395. This is for the construction phase of the project, which in the current tip would be in the FYI category, but is for FY25. It's 3.7 million, all federally funded NHPP funds.
Okay, very good. May we have a motion to approve that amendment?
So moved.
Moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have discussion on it before we vote? All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye or wave.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Very good. That item passes. Then item C, we have fiscal 24-5 UPWP. Rob, if you could lead us through those.
Sure. The UPWP is the Unified Planning Work Program. About a month or two ago, I had sent out the draft. We discussed the various chapters and things that are in it. The simple version now is basically the UPWP identifies tasks initiated by the COG between July 1st, 23 and June 30th, 2025. Basically describes the planning tasks, products, who will perform the tasks, schedule for completing the tasks, the cost of work, and the source of funds. This is all basically to maintain a federally compliant MPO planning process. Let's see, the public comment period began on April 5th and will go through June 3rd. Last month, we had a hybrid public meeting last Wednesday, both in the office and virtual. We have four motions. I don't know if you wanted to do them separately or one motion for all. I can just go through them, what the four are. The first is to conditionally endorse the FY24 and FY25 UPWP. The second is to endorse the roles and responsibilities, which is in Appendix A. This is basically the roles and responsibilities of the state, the MPO, and the transit districts. It basically describes who will do what in the process. The third is to endorse the authorizing resolution, which authorizes the director, chair, or vice chair to enter into the agreement with DOT to fund the UPWP over the 2-year period. And the fourth is the delegation of authority, which basically states, let me pull it up here, who is eligible or can sign for which part of the UPWP. Basically, the treasurer can authorize the executive director's timesheets and things like that. The executive director can authorize admin staff and the ISP invoices to DOT, and in absence of the director, the deputy director can sign. These were all sent out, and so you had a chance to read it, but those are the four items that we would need motions for.
And that's the existing process. Nothing has changed in this process.
Yes.
It's just reconfirming the existing process.
I think we'd be relieved to do all four at once. So may we have a motion to approve the four portions of the UPWP?
Hello? I would
We-
make that motion.
Just gotta remember next year that I do one. See how they.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. May we have a second on that for the four?
Second.
Very good. Any discussion on this? There'll be a quiz at the end of it, but other than that. All right, all in favor of the four? Wait, yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Very well, that passes. Okay, next is the performance measures targets. Rob again.
Yep. Let's see here. Final rule on statewide non-metropolitan and metropolitan transportation planning came out in 2016. Basically, planning rules establish requirements for states, MPOs, and transit providers to set performance targets and incorporate them into the transportation planning project based on the federal required performance measures. Let's see here. Typically, as you know, we do the safety targets on an annual basis. The targets we are looking at today are various targets using 2 and 4, or various measures using 2 and 4 year targets. So the last time these were brought up was 5 years ago. With the packet, I did send out all the specific metrics and specific targets. I won't go into any great detail here unless we have specific questions, but just we'll go through what the measures are. Also, all 30 of the performance measures are listed in the roles and responsibilities section of the UPWT we had just mentioned. Basically, at this point, the state, or since 2016, the state comes up with the targets, and they have been adopted by all the MPOs and transit providers. There is the option for MPOs and transit providers to come up with their own targets. At this point, CROG had talked about it at one point, but no one's done that yet. The performance measures we are looking at today include percentage of pavements on interstates in good condition and poor condition, percentage of pavements on non-interstates in good and poor condition. Bridge conditions are a percentage of NHS bridges classified as good and classified as poor. For performance on the NHS, there's the percentage of person miles traveled on interstates that are reliable and person mile traveled on non-interstates that are reliable. For freight movement, the truck travel time reliability index is used, which is similar to the reliability index. Under the CMAQ program, we're looking at total emissions reductions. This is VOx, NOx, and particulate matters, as well as for the individual urbanized areas, peak hour of excessive delay, and non-single occupancy vehicle measures. I did send out all the various metrics and all the performance measures. I don't know if we want to go into detail on anything specific or just adopt these as we're sent out.
Very good. This requires, let's see, will this require a motion for, yeah, okay.
Yes, there was a resolution that was sent out that did include all the 2 and 4 year targets.
All right, so may we have a motion on that, please?
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion before we vote? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Abstain or opposed? All right, that carries. Thank you. And then other transportation updates, Rob.
I don't really have too much. Hopefully we'll be receiving the PAL, the project authorization letter, to begin the airline trail study next month.
Yeah, we got a letter. Senator Lesser reached out to DOT on our behalf and was told that the fiscal department is overburdened and that we should be getting that project authorization letter hopefully next month. Go ahead, Rob.
I think that's about it. I'm working on the grant agreement to get the Safe Routes to School program started.
Oh no, Safe Streets for All, you mean?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Safe Streets for All. I was just thinking Safe Routes to School because I know DOT, if you haven't heard, they are reviving that program and bringing it back, so that you should be hearing more about that in the future as well.
Megan, maybe you can give an update on the Thrive grant, where we stand with that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we are still in the very preliminary process of this. We did attend a welcome webinar, I believe I reported on last meeting, where they basically told us that they're building the plane as they're flying it. But they did give us a couple of things to work on while we wait to hear from our capacity building team over at WSP. That was a self-assessment. So we're working with the towns that are participating, Clinton, Westbrook, Old Saybrook, and Middletown, to conduct that self-assessment, basically looking at what other plans, studies, or grants we have that can overlap with this process, who the people in town, what organizations or groups we should be reaching out to partner with, starting to shape out a rough scope for the project and identifying the areas that we believe we have sufficient capacity to do ourselves, and then the areas where we're going to need technical assistance. And as I've been saying, while we've been working through this, we are sharing the consultant with 13 other groups. And I am really banking on the fact that we go into that first meeting being more prepared than all the rest of them, so that we are just ready to hit the ground running and can command a lot of the time and attention. So that's the strategy as of now. And we should know more coming up in July or August.
Thank you, Megan. And I'll give an update on a potential other federal grant. There's a new program called Protect, and our friend Laura Francis over at South Central Region COG. We had a meeting with South Central and also a meeting with Connecticut DOT, talking about a potential application to that new grant program for evacuation plans for our two regions. There has been evacuation planning work done in the past, but Laura was thinking that we can take into consideration inland evacuations as well. I brought the issue of evacuations in the future of electric buses and electric vehicles and how that might change evacuations, and to see what else we could do. In our discussions with DOT, it was unclear whether DOT has decided that they want to go in a state application, statewide evacuation application, but they said that they wouldn't be offended if we went on our own. But stay tuned. We still have a few months before that application is due, and but since we do share the same Dennis region, and obviously Laura has familiarity with our region, she wanted to bring us in on that. So that's going forward. Trying to think of any other transportation updates. I think that's it, and we can turn over to Estuary Transit District for their update.
Good.
So I know Brendan. I don't know if and Joe is as well. Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll kick it off, and Joe can add things as well. So thank you all. Happy to give some updates. So first, it's been over a month now since we've announced our new brand, River Valley Transit, which is exciting. So we're very happy with that. People seem to like it, and our riders are starting to get used to it, which is nice. We still have a lot of work to do to sort of help, officially have the transition. So we're still working to get our new signage at our terminal and operations center. So we're working with the consultant to make sure it reflect the new name and logo. We also currently have 2 small shuttle buses and 1 large bus wrapped in the logo. So you might see those around town. You'll see them more frequently throughout our region. We're working to get most of the old buses and all the new buses wrapped. So you'll see our new beautiful buses coming around soon. So we can look out for those. We also recently did a photo shoot of our region, which was excellent, to get a bunch of pictures for our new website. So we were working on a new website that'll be launching very soon. We're excited about that as well. So it'll be a much improved website easier for folks to navigate, and have a lot more. We'll have a lot more features as well for our riders. So that we're excited about that too. I'll also mention our microtransit grant. So we applied for a microtransit grant. The state has it's a statewide grant for 2 years of service for an on-demand microtransit service. A quick sort of refresher on what a microtransit is. So that's our extra mile service, which operates similar to a public transit ride sharing app. So think of like an Uber or Lyft, but public transit. So riders request to pick up on a drop off. We come pick them up in a shuttle bus, and we'll also pick up other riders on the way as well, if that's the case. So it's sort of a way, it's a shared ride on demand system that people like a lot. We have one currently in Old Saybrook and portions of Essex and Westbrook. And also we have a pilot in Middletown that's been going well as well. So we're excited about that. And so as part of this grant, we applied for three microtransit pilot zones for 2 years of funding. The first is we wanted to make sure we maintained funding for Middletown. We'd already done a pilot months ago and it went very well. So we wanted to make sure we had 2 more years of funding secured for that before we had just used ARPA funds. So now we have a longer term source of funding for at least 2 years to get more data on it and see how it works. But we already have a proof of concept there. The second place we're looking at is East Hampton, so in the Belltown area of East Hampton. So one of the things that the grant specifies is they want to see urban, suburban, and rural uses of microtransits. The point of this grant is to sort of test the waters and see where microtransits can work in Connecticut. And so we're uniquely positioned that we have all 3. So we applied for all 3. And so our rural portion is the East Hampton and the Belltown area, which is nice because it still has, a decent population center, as well as key shopping destinations as well. So we think that that'll also be a successful zone, and we'll have low overhead with only 1 vehicle. So we're excited about that application. Now our last zone, which is our biggest and will be sort of our biggest endeavor in microtransit, would be a combined 2-town zone of Madison and Guilford. So this zone would encompass both the entirety of both Madison and Guilford. And so for many months before this, we've been talking with the town of Madison about, they were looking for ways to improve transportation, especially to the northern portion of their town. Many residents there don't have any access to public transportation. So this is sort of already in the works. And when this opportunity came up, it sort of was a natural fit. And they brought in Guilford as well. And so we sort of are excited about this massive zone. We think most of the activity will occur on Boston Post Road, near the train stations. And so I think it'll be similar to our old Saybrook zone, which does very well. So we think we'll see good ridership there too. So again, we'll see how we do on those. I think we're confident we'll get something out of it in the state because we do have a good track record of microtransit, which we're excited that hopefully we'll get something, but we'll see. We've yet to see about that. I'll also mention too, we have a proposed service change. So we're currently I'm doing public outreach about our proposed service changes, our schedule changes, as well as our route changes. And so we are currently conducting route rides and doing tables, talking with key community organizations to sort of get that valuable feedback before we make any final decisions. So I will say truly the feedback is helpful, and we already are looking at changing our proposed routes based on feedback we've heard. So we want to collect more, though we're still going to be doing more to collect more feedback, but we've already received a lot of valuable feedback. So we're going to continue to do that. I also quickly mention that I've been talking for the past few updates about new technology upgrades. Those are hopefully actually going to be happening finally next month. It's been sort of they've been sort of disappointed how the timeline has been sort of way behind on that, but we're hopeful we'll get our new kiosk at the terminal, our new electronic science at the terminal, as well as our new bus upgrades to track stop level data, as well as automatic voice announcements. So hopefully those will get implemented. And finally, I'll just mention too that it's been nice to be working more with the COG recently as I'll be as part of the Regional Housing Committee, sort of give the trans perspective there, as well as working with the Thrive Grant and other aspects as well. So I'm excited to be more engaged in that as well in the coming months. So that's exciting as well for me. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that's a lot of updates, so happy to provide any questions.
Any questions for Brendan? If not, we thank you.
No, but I would like to say to Joe, we had Senator Marks joining us earlier, and she said that she will be talking to the governor about cuts to Shoreline East, and I did mention to her our request that they replace the missing trains with some sort of express bus service. So so she said that she was going to be complaining about this issue.
That's great, and it's something. Yeah, we haven't heard from the department recently about it, but we know that they're considering that possibility.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Anything else from River Valley? I see that the chairman has arrived. Tony, do you want to pick up with the COG business section, or how do you?
Sure, no problem. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate taking over. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I was delayed. Fiscal year 24 budget. Sam, do you want to say something before we get a motion on this?
Sure. Here I can share the budget. Eliza, you had to make me a. So give me the commissions. Oh, there I have. All right. So this is the draft budget that was sent out last week with the memo. The budget does show some growth in our revenues, and we hope that come next fiscal year we'll be able to add an employee. You'll see most of the change is from that added employee. Otherwise, most things are this year. You'll see that we had an overage on salary. That's because we were able to keep Torrance for longer than we originally had planned, but that was made up by underspending in other categories. I'm just wondering if there's any questions of the members on the draft budget. This is presented to you for either approval at this meeting, or we can take it back and approve it at the next June meeting. And then one last thing about this is that we are making the assumption for our regional services grant, which is that top line there, of $303,973. But there is discussion with the leadership of the General Assembly to make good of a promise by the former speaker, Brendan Sharkey, of raising the statewide COG funding for regional services grant from 4.1 million to 7 million. And if that was the case, COG directors met on Monday to discuss and we agreed upon a formula for distributing that extra $3 million. And so RiverCOG would stand to gain some significant money, which we would then be able to use on projects and use on staff. But it's too early to know. We probably won't know until after the implementer is approved, unfortunately, whether or not that happens. But as of right now, we are budgeting for last year's amount because nothing has passed yet. So, any questions?
Okay, I will take a motion if the council's ready to move forward with either approving or disapproving, or we can put this off. What is your pleasure? Can I get a motion?
I think Tim just waved.
Move it.
I'll second.
Second by Carl. Any further discussion on the budget for fiscal year 24?
And I'll just add, the dues rate is staying the same, although we do use DPH numbers. So I think DPH had us increasing by 411 people. So we get 400. We didn't increase by 411 people. We're increasing by $411 based on our per capita formula. So that means we probably added more like 800 people, which is not a bad thing. You'll see your dues number might have changed a few dollars here and there because we use that annual DPH estimate, but the dues formula stay the same this year.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Household hazardous waste update, Janice?
Thank you. Yes, we have had 2 household hazardous waste collections and 1 paper shredding event. They were all well attended. So those are all going great. Our upcoming June collections will be Old Lyme, June 17th for hazardous waste, and a paper shredding event on the 24th in Westbrook. We continue to work with DEEP on closing our facility in Essex. And we are waiting to hear from DEEP on our Regional Waste Authority grant. We've still heard nothing back from them, so we're crossing our fingers for that grant. If there's any questions about hazardous waste.
Any questions for Janice? Okay, thanks, Janice. Janice, you want to move on to agricultural?
Absolutely. The trailer for our drill
Hi, Margo.
is having the
Yes, it is.
rails welded on. The width of the trailer and the width of the tires on the drill are pretty close. And so we're adding a little bit of security by putting these rails on, short rails. Our C&D, Resource Conservation and Development in Haddam, received a grant to do 4 equipment hubs for farmers in the state. One of them would be our hub where it would continue. Our grant runs out in October, and this would continue for another couple of years to have that equipment hub. And it could also possibly have more equipment brought to that hub, which farmers would be requesting. Let's see what else. That's pretty much what I have for rec. If there's any questions.
Any questions?
I just have one addition.
Thanks,
under-
Janice.
Under waste, we did apply for that regional waste planning grant. We have yet to hear anything from Deep on that. So just wanted to report that under waste.
Thanks, Sam. Update on regional housing, Sam, or is it going to be Megan?
Will be Megan. Go ahead, Megan.
Megan.
Thanks. So I'm happy to report that we had our first regional housing committee meeting last week. We're still working on setting up the regular schedule for time and day, but we should have that settled before the next meeting. It's a really great group. It's mostly planners and CEOs and also municipal housing committee members or chairs. So there's a really awesome knowledge and experience base that we're working with for discussions. We went over the bylaws and the charge of the committee, and we started prioritizing what we're going to work on first and deciding what would be most useful for the towns. For the next meeting, we're going to do a little presentation comparing the changes in home price and value since the adoption of our 830J plans. We're planning to do that test running our web-based data dashboard that we've been working on for a nice visual representation for that discussion. We're also going to have 3 short presentations by different towns explaining lessons learned from projects that they've worked on or that have gone through, or regulations that they have adopted or not, success and not so successful stories. We're planning to consolidate that information and leverage it as part of our housing toolkit so that we can use it as a resource for all of the towns. And hopefully at the next meeting, we'll be able to preview a layout for the housing committee website so that we can have a home for all of this great information as we get it. So all in all, I would say the Regional Housing Committee is off to a really wonderful start.
Any questions on regional housing? Okay. You want to take seeds also, Megan?
Sure. So last month, we submitted the SEDS for approval from the state. They had 60 days to review and approve it, and they got back to us in less than 14. So I'll take that as a good sign. They have authorized us to submit it to EDA and to apply for our Federal Economic Development District status. So we're going to do both at the same time. We're working on putting that EDD request package together. They request a lot of information, so we are trying to get that done as quickly as possible because we understand the federal process to be lengthy and we really want to get the ball rolling on that. But all going well so far.
Thank you, Megan.
Any additional questions for Megan? Thanks, Megan. Good job. Thank you. Land trust, Margaret?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Let's see, we have just some short updates today. The Lower Connecticut River Land Trust postponed its meeting from last week till tomorrow. But tomorrow's meeting will focus on the review of the grant applications that we got for our small stewardship grant. We received 2, one from East Haddam Land Trust and one from the town of Essex. And so they'll be taking a closer look at those and coming to a decision on awards for next month. And they're also going to be taking a closer look at conservation defense insurance. It's called Terra Firma, that is offered through the Land Trust Alliance. And this is primarily for the purpose of investigating the taking of conservation easements by the land trusts for our land trust properties and our municipal open space properties, which serve as kind of a secondary way to ensure open space perpetuity. And so I'll have more on the land trust for our next meeting because of the postponement.
Thanks, Margot. Any questions on land trust? Okay, Margot, you want to do invasive species, please?
Yeah, so for aquatic invasive species, you know, we primarily work on the water chestnut and the hydrilla issues within the river. Water chestnut has begun to emerge in the Mattabasset, so it is starting to come up in our more shallow areas. So we'll begin looking for it in the next couple of weeks and taking care of it before it gets out of hand. And you've also begun to receive notifications from the Army Corps concerning the public outreach meeting that's going to be held in June for the Connecticut River Hydrilla project. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know. There's also a website up for the project through the Army Corps that has all the information of the project. I'm going to put a link up on our website under our aquatic invasive species project page to that website for you. But I want to encourage all of you to please come to that meeting, and all the research scientists will be there with all the information about what they will be doing this summer and next summer. And they're happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have, and to please forward that information that you get to your conservation commissions and anybody else in town that you think would be interested in learning about the project.
Thanks, Margaret. Anyone have any questions? Okay, Demis, Torrance? Are you doing it or?
Yeah, I'll
Yes,
give
sir.
it. I'll give it this month. This report is for the 10 Region 2 towns of the 17 RiverCOG towns. The oldest of our 3-year Homeland Security grants will expire June 15th. We've spent that grant down to 0, which is always a good thing. We don't want to be giving money back. We have 2 projects left that are completed that invoices haven't been paid. Security grant will begin the budget process within the next 2 months, and that one will go online to replace the old one that expires in October. I don't often talk about the equipment, the regional equipment that's purchased, but I did want to note that Region 2 owns what's called a burn trailer. It's a tractor trailer size trailer that's used for training fire personnel. Controlled fires are lit within it, and that's how they train to go into buildings and use stairways and rooms, etc. That has been offline for a couple of years because Demis had a 10-year rule where these grant funds could not be used to repair or upgrade this type of equipment. And this burn trailer has been in the region's possession for over 10 years. But recently a determination was made that that 10-year rule wouldn't apply in this case. So that burn trailer has been inspected and it will be brought up to grade and will go back online. And I know numerous towns in the region of the 30 Region 2 towns use this burn trailer for fire personnel training. It's a very valuable and probably most used resource, and it's valuable enough that it's often shared outside of Region 2 as well. So that's an important piece of news. A field day will be coming up. We'll get you information on that, but that's the field day where the equipment is brought to a location. So first selectmen and any other town personnel can have a look at the equipment that's purchased with these regional funds. Mr. Chairman, that's my report. If there are any questions. I will say that we're almost finished 2021 grant, the OAs have been issued for the 2022 grant that was issued last October. And Susie Beckman, who will be taking over Demis, is working on finalizing collection of the 2021 Memorandum of Understanding and will be overseeing the distribution and collection of the 2022 Memorandums of Understanding. And that's always a challenge to get those flowing and back to RiverCOG and up to Demis. That's my report. And if you have any questions, anyone, you can contact me or Susie Beckman. Thank you.
Thanks, Torrance. Any questions? Okay. Legislative update. Who wants to handle that today?
Yeah, so I'll kick it off, and then any members can bring up any items that they're concerned about. First thing, we did send out a letter regarding the early voting and the concerns on the about how the towns are going to pull that off. We got responses. We didn't get a response from any legislators. We got responses from Secretary of the State, who said that she agrees with us that it should be early voting, early voting by paper ballots, by no excuse absentee ballots. But she says that she doesn't have a say in this matter, and that's why she's been advocating for at least funding the early voting, in-person early voting. We also heard back from Betsy Guerra from Cost saying that it looks like it's going to go through because the voters did vote for it at the referendum for the constitutional amendment last fall. So that's where we're at with that. Of course, my concern that I voiced in our letter is that it's going to be very difficult to claw back in-person early voting once it's established, and to replace it with much more cost-effective and at least for the towns, no excuse absentee ballots. But we'll see what happens. Along those lines, we did submit testimony and worked on a bill with Northeast Connecticut COG on the state funding our regional election monitors again. When this program was started a few years ago, there was funding from the Secretary of State's office. Then the funding stopped. We've continued to fund our program out of our state regional services grant because it was value to the towns. And we were asking for a modest amount of money, $25,000 per COG to pay for this regional service. And we made the argument that, especially for early voting, this is going to be a lot of work and for the towns, and having someone at the COG who can help out would be valuable. So Senator Marks was advocating on the behalf of that bill. So hopefully it will go somewhere. And then finally, the other big area that I've been involved in is housing. There's a few different housing bills that have been discussed as maybe coming together in some sort of Frankenstein bill. We have continued our advocacy in advocating for support for things that we talk about in our regional housing plan, and pointing out some of the major issues and some of the bills that have been put forward. One of the bill that was probably most concerned is the fair share housing bill that would already identifies the methodology for coming up with a number of housing units and distributing them across regions and across towns, and then creating for the first time legal liability on the towns to be able to be eventually sued if those housing units aren't created. In my letters and outreach to legislators, I point out a number of the issues about how it is not the metric of success is the number of households helped, it's the number of certificates of occupancy issued, and that we need a broad toolkit to help address housing issues, and building a new housing unit for every housing burdened household may not be the best solution in all cases. And then of course there's the budget. As I mentioned earlier, there's a chance that RiverCOG may get some additional funding next year, but that is yet to be seen. Any questions or any other bills that members want to bring up their concerns about?
There is one for those municipalities with constables and resident troopers. They are adjusting the requirement for the certification period for you, and extending it so that you can get your certification as required by law. That's HB 6622. And the other one that Sam mentioned with regards to early voting, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that bill, to be honest with you. And just to give you a couple of more of the highlights, it's 14 days for a general election, 7 days prior for primaries, 4 days for special elections, and presidential preference primaries. However, you're lucky it doesn't count for referendums, so you don't have to do it. For the most part, it still doesn't explain everything and how we're supposed to go about it. And it would have been far easier if they just made it absentee ballots, and I agree with Sam. Once they start this, I don't think we're going to be able to go backwards. But I think this is going to be costly. They're not telling us how to do it yet, and whether or not you're going to have to open up, and what the hours are. I don't think they worked that out, if I remember correctly, Sam. Am I right?
No, I
Right.
don't think, none of the details have been worked out of how they're actually gonna pull this off. But
So-
it's in effect until 24. So,
Correct. So they got another year, but I would stay in touch with your representatives and senators on this and give your views. Because I think ultimately it is going to end up to be costly for us. With that, anyone else legislatively? Okay, Carl.
So, through CCM, I've been involved in discussions with the firefighters over the firefighter cancer presumption bill, which is alive and well. And what we're trying to do is come to a resolution that keeps firefighter cancer presumption legislation out of workers' compensation. So what the bill proposes, what the bill on the floor, I think in the Senate through Julie Kushner, is proposing is that if a firefighter gets diagnosed with one of I think it's like 10 or 13 different types of cancer, they have to be an interior structure firefighter. They have to have, not have smoked. They have to have followed all certain protocols, cleaning their equipment, things like that. But if a firefighter, and most of the firefighters, I assume, do follow those protocols, and no history of cancer before they came into the service. But if a firefighter were to get cancer while they are a firefighter, including a volunteer firefighter, what the bill proposes is they can file workers' comp claims, and there is a presumption that the cancer was caused as a result of their profession. Through KERMA, we can't even, several of us sit on the board of directors for KERMA and CCM, but KERMA can't even really run a model on what it would cost because they have no freaking idea whether it would be 15 million or 100 million. So, and the idea to keep it out of workers' compensation is if it goes in, our rates are they're just going to skyrocket. So what is trying to be worked out with the firefighters is that the state would create a fund and put money into the fund this year, either through bonding or through surplus funds, and then perhaps contribute every year. And firefighters would then be able to basically follow the same rules. There'd still be a presumption, but it would not be in workers' compensation. It would be basically administered through workers' comp, but paid out through the state. However, one thing I don't like is we're talking about having the towns upfront the money and then be reimbursed through the fund. However, we're trying to build in safeguards there also, and the safeguards would be that if the fund runs dry, then the towns are no longer on the hook. And I don't know where the negotiations are going to go. I think, we are still in negotiations about this. But what I would urge all of you to do, and this is not anti-firefighter, it's not like saying they don't deserve benefits for their profession if they do contract an illness related to that profession. But keeping this out of workers' compensation is pretty darn critical, if you ask me. It's kind of flying under the radar. It's just another benefit, but it's very similar, I think, even though it's workers' comp insurance and not a direct pay through the town. It's very much like heart and hypertension, and what heart and hypertension did to all of us, or a lot of us. And, little town like Old Saybrook, we've already settled 2 cases on heart and hypertension, but we have 6 more in the pipeline. It's 2023. That law ended in 98 or 1996. And we're still looking at 6. Yeah, we're still looking at 6 more claims. So, extrapolate that out to Bridgeport or Hartford or Cromwell or, any of the towns with a municipal force. So this is kind of flying under the radar, but it's a bad thing. And, I'm hopeful that we can come to a resolution and that the state will fund it. And fund it at a very significant amount, just to see what happens with the claims over the next 2 to 4 years, to understand whether the claims are 15 million a year or whether they're 80 million a year. And if they're 80 million a year, clearly it's unsustainable. If it's 15 million a year, well, maybe it's more sustainable through a state fed system. So just bringing that to your attention. It's out there, it's happening. I testified against it and was basically mocked, I felt, by the chairperson of the committee. But it's just, I saw Norm Needleman yesterday, and this is going to sound awful. I mean, I just feel more powerless after 12 years than I've ever felt. I just feel like they're going to do their thing regardless, unless there is 169 towns that are unanimously against something, and every one of those towns makes a big deal. What they choose to do is going to happen, and that's how I feel. And I said that to Norm yesterday. He didn't completely disagree with me as a senator, but I almost feel like there's very little we can do. And oh, it's cute that we protested. Oh yeah, that's but or put a letter in opposition, and then it goes nowhere, and then they do what they do. So anyway, working on this firefighter workers comp thing, just bringing it to everyone's attention. And if you want to reach out to your legislators and tell them that it's a bad idea and that they should work towards a different resolution, that'd be a good thing.
Carl, I can't agree. 1 second, Jim. More with what you said. I thought when they passed this initially, they had set up a fund or a mechanism for funding it. And once they got their foot in the door, it all changes again. It is, in my opinion, I couldn't agree with you more. It's going to end up like H&H. And nothing against firefighters, but excuse me, sir.
In 2016, I believe they passed legislation that taxed on, I think, 2-3 cents on cell phone bills. but the way they did it, the way the legislature did it, they didn't vote on it. They just kind of administratively, I don't understand the exact details.
Yeah.
In other words, they didn't want to vote. They didn't want to be on the record as raising cell phone taxes by like 3 cents. And so they tried to sneak it in a different way. And it was actually ruled unconstitutional the way they did it. So that went down the drain, and that source of funding went down the drain. So we said to them this time around, just do it again. Let's do it. Let's start funding this. It's really important that we get a fund set up, that we get some money in there this year, and that we have a regular stream of revenue that goes into it. And, you know, I think putting 3 to 5 cents on everyone's cell phone bill, you won't notice it. And God knows, like, families have 6 cell phones. And it would seem to me it would raise enough money, but that's not happening either this year. It's just like they want to ram it through workers' comp.
Yeah. So I agree with Carl, and I think if the state wants to pass it, and again, this has nothing to do with firefighters, then the state should fund it. Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when we put in our letter with regard to the early voting, we were a little late. The House had already passed their bill. What would be the most effective way of voicing our collective disagreement with this particular potential action? You know, do we get together, Carl, with CCM, with Cost, and do our own CEO letters, or is it personal? What would be recommended in terms of
let me get with
responding?
Sam. Let me get back to Sam in the next day or two and check back with Brian O'Connor up at CCM and see what the latest is. I just haven't had time in the last 2 days to check back in. But yes, I think a similar CEO type letter, if everybody was in agreement, would be a good idea. That we'd like to, I think, not come up with the solution through this COG, but at least say keep it out of workers' compensation. I think that would be the message. Very simple. Keep firefighter cancer presumption out of workers' compensation. What?
I think, no, Jim was talking about early voting, I think, and you're talking about, right?
No, that's not true. I was using
making an analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I was making the analogy.
All right, I got confused. Sorry.
Anyway, so I'll give Sam a buzz later on today.
Okay, good. Yeah, probably come up with something that we can all sign on board. Sam, you got anything else you'd like to add?
Not under legislation, no.
Under your comments?
Yeah, so under the director's report, a few things. First, it is coming up in that time of year for my annual review. I am working on my procrastinated task of writing my self-evaluation, which is always not very much fun, but I will be getting that to the executive committee shortly. And I encourage the members who are not on the executive committee to feel free to reach out to Tony or the other officers of RiverCOG if you have any comments or suggestions for that annual review. Also, I heard from the executive director of the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. They are starting up a regional building official program, and they may have excess capacity in that program. And they're looking to see if any of our towns are in need of a building official or a building official support. This is something which, you know, we've been talking about, of how do we provide regional building official services. I had a really great chat with Amanda Kennedy, who's the director over there, and it's an issue because you want to employ you want the COG to employ a full-time person, but it depends on having enough towns buy into the service. And of course, one town's need for a building official, for a part-time building official, doesn't line up with the timeline of another town's need. But I told her I'd bring this to you to gauge if there's any interest in receiving about 10 to 12 hours a week of building official services. And if there was, maybe we can start a conversation. So.
All right, anybody have any questions for Sam?
So I
I
see
have
Janice
one.
I see Janice has a question, I think.
Janice, you got a question or a statement?
A statement.
Okay.
I just
I
wanted to
thought
add
so.
one thing, please. At the beginning of the month, I attended a meeting for the Shoreline Soup Kitchens and Pantries. They did say that they are up 24% from what they were last year. There's still a lot of hungry people out there. This is pretty consistent with other areas in the state. So any support to help hungry people is really appreciated.
Thanks,
And-
Janice.
And then I'll
Go ahead,
also
Sam.
add, there's one other project I'll get you up to speed on. The EPA is giving out grants to the largest metropolitan statistical areas, MSAs, in the country to the tune of $1 million to do planning on air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. 3 of our cities in Connecticut, our metropolitan statistical areas, got grants, and Middlesex County is part of the Hartford MSA. So as part of that, we are working with Capital Region Council of Governments. Megan has been working on a scope with the staff up there, and we are going to partner with them in this project and hopefully get some money towards our staff time participation in this. As you all know, the COG and the towns don't have a lot of control over air pollution or greenhouse gas emissions. So we're really trying to narrow the scope into things where we could actually, make a difference, whether it be municipal facilities, other community facilities such as the hospitals, and other things we might be able to do to maybe reduce emissions from transportation. I know Capital Region is interested in air quality and greenhouse gas emissions and using some money to help address waste issues. I know that's an interest, but it's an interesting project. But when it comes down to it, and you think about the major emitters that towns really have control over, you have sewer plants, you might have town facilities, schools. But when it comes to, let's say building efficiency, building code, upgrading housing units to be more efficient, there might be some role there, but there's not necessarily a lot of authority. And the hope is that through this planning process, we can identify projects that would then move on to a funding implementation phase. So we'll be working with them, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this probably in the second half of this year.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Does anybody else have any other business for the good of the council? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Everyone have a great
Aye.
day. Stay safe.
Oh, and one last thing, I got a very nice letter from Charlene Janicek of Chester, thanking everyone for their well wishes and really complimenting the COG for the support that you give each other. So, and our thoughts are with her. I don't know if you heard the news. She lost her son about a week and a half ago, in addition to her brother, and also fighting a battle of cancer. So she is going through a very tough time up there. Former First Selectman Ed Meehan, who's also on the Board of Selectmen, is sort of filling in selectman duties in her absence. So many of you may know Ed. So he was a very competent First Selectman. He hired me, so that shows how competent he is. And so the town of Chester's in good hands. But yeah, Charlene, unfortunately, this has not been a good year for her. Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye all.
Bye.